December 1944. The Ardennes forests are cloaked in frost. Snow crunches under every boot. Artillery booms echo through the skeletal trees, shaking the frozen ground. Men of the U.S. 101st Airborne cling to foxholes, rifles gripped tight, breath hanging in the icy air. Tanks groan as they struggle through the mud, wheels coated in a thick, slushy paste. Amid the chaos, a low rumble grows louder, a sound unlike anything the German soldiers expect. A convoy of massive trucks and mobile workshops emerges from the fog, engines humming, tools clattering, and mechanics leaping into action. Within minutes, disabled tanks are hoisted, repaired, and sent back into the fray. Soldiers watch, slack-jawed, as broken artillery roars to life again, as if the very machines refuse to die. For the Germans, it is impossible. Entire columns of armored vehicles vanish into repair bays and reappear, battle-ready. Mere hours later, this is not just supply, it is ingenuity on wheels, an American miracle unfolding at the front lines. The frozen battlefield has become a stage, and the Germans are watching in stunned disbelief. Transition to context. To understand why this stunned the enemy, we must look at the state of mechanized warfare and logistics in Europe. Before these mobile repair shops arrived by late 1944, the European front had become a testament to the industrial scale and intensity of modern warfare. Germany, reeling from the relentless advance of Allied forces, relied heavily on static supply lines and established repair depots. Their panzer divisions, once the spearhead of Blitzkrieg, now struggled as Allied air superiority and sabotaged rail networks slowed reinforcement and replacements. Every disabled vehicle represented not only a tactical loss but a logistical nightmare. The Americans, however, approached warfare differently. The U.S. Army's doctrine emphasized mobility, flexibility, and rapid problem-solving. The concept of maintenance at the front had evolved through experience in North Africa, Italy, and France. Engineers and mechanics were trained not just to fix broken machines but to anticipate failure, carrying spare parts, tools, and makeshift solutions wherever combat moved. By late 1944, these units were integrated into combat divisions, ready to operate under fire, in mud, snow, or shattered towns. One of the most remarkable innovations was the mobile repair shop, vehicles converted into fully equipped workshops, complete with welding stations, hoists, spare tracks, and tools. Unlike traditional depots hundreds of miles behind the front lines, these shops moved with the units. A Sherman tank disabled in a roadside crater could be repaired within hours, sometimes minutes, without retreating to a central facility. For German commanders observing from the front, the speed and efficiency of these operations were inconceivable. Logistics had always been a decisive factor in war. Yet Germany underestimated the Americans' ability to marry industrial power with tactical innovation. While German engineers depended on fixed facilities and long supply trains, the U.S. Army transformed the battlefield into a living, mobile factory. Every mechanized unit, every convoy of trucks, every repair team contributed to a system where machinery could be continuously recycled into combat readiness. This innovation was not merely technical. It had profound psychological effects. German troops, accustomed to capturing or destroying Allied vehicles to gain advantage, found themselves facing a front where destruction was temporary. Tanks would disappear into these mobile workshops and reappear operational, negating German tactical gains and eroding morale. The concept of permanent damage had been replaced by rapid, almost miraculous repair. The stage was set in the Ardennes, where dense forest, frozen rivers, and narrow roads created perfect conditions for surprise and concealment. Here, in December 1944, the Germans would witness the Americans' mobile repair capability in full force, challenging assumptions about logistics, engineering, and the limits of frontline warfare. As December 1944 approached, the Battle of the Bulge loomed on the horizon. German commanders, confident in their ability to exploit poor weather and surprise, believed they could cripple the American advance through a concentrated armored thrust. Their intelligence, however, failed to account for one of the most overlooked strengths of the U.S. Army, its logistical ingenuity. While German panzer units relied on stationary repair depots and cumbersome supply lines, stretching back to the Ruhr, American forces had embedded maintenance within their combat formations. Every division carried a network of mobile workshops, from light jeeps fitted with tools to massive trucks functioning as rolling machine shops. These units were manned by mechanics trained to operate under artillery fire, enemy air raids, and freezing conditions. They could repair engines, replace treads, fix turrets, and even rebuild damaged transmissions within hours of a breakdown. In the dense Ardennes forests, where visibility was low and roads were narrow, these mobile repair teams transformed the battlefield into a dynamic system, constantly replenishing combat-ready vehicles. The Germans first noticed the impact during skirmishes on December 16, 1944. American Sherman tank, previously disabled by mines or artillery, would vanish into the forest with mechanics and equipment. Hours later, the same tanks returned to the front line, fully operational, ready to counterattack. For German officers observing the front, this was beyond comprehension. In their experience, a disabled tank was a lost asset, often abandoned to the enemy. The speed, efficiency, and mobility of these repair teams defied all conventional warfare logic. Beyond technical proficiency, the Americans integrated supply and repair with intelligence and operational planning. Forward commanders coordinated with maintenance units, anticipating vehicle attrition, while mobile workshops moved strategically along the axis of advance. This ensured minimal downtime for tanks, half-tracks, and artillery pieces, effectively turning every damaged vehicle into a temporary setback rather than a permanent loss. German planners, fixated on destroying the enemy's materiel, were frustrated to see that each strike had only a fleeting effect. The psychological impact was equally significant. German soldiers, trained to respect the destructive power of the U.S. Army's armored divisions, now faced a new reality. Machines they believed neutralized would return to the fight. This constant replenishment eroded morale and sowed doubt among German commanders about the effectiveness of their own tactic. The Americans' ability to rebuild on the move became a force multiplier, allowing smaller units to hold positions against numerically superior attacks. By the time the first major engagements of the Ardennes offensive unfolded, the Germans had witnessed firsthand the Americans' revolutionary approach to battlefield logistics. The mobile repair shops were no longer a theoretical concept. They were active participants in the fight, sustaining combat power in ways that would redefine frontline expectations. In the winter forest of Belgium, the groundwork had been laid for a demonstration of engineering, adaptability, and relentless efficiency that would leave German officers stunned and questioning the very nature of modern warfare. Angle 1. The human element, mechanics under fire. They were not infantry. They were not tank crews. Yet they worked closer to the front than many riflemen. American vehicle mechanics lived in a narrow space between safety and exposure. Their tools were wrenches, welding torches, spare parts soaked in oil. Their workplace was a roadside ditch, a shattered barn, a forest clearing still warm from shell fire. When a tank broke down under fire, it was often these men who moved forward first, sometimes before the smoke had fully cleared. Most had trained in stateside depots, learning engines and transmissions far from danger. In Europe, those skills were tested under artillery bursts and sniper fire. A repair team might work through the night, headlights blacked out, breath fogging in freezing air, fingers numb as they replaced a damaged track pin or patched a fuel line. They slept little. They moved constantly. German officers later remarked on this phenomenon in captured reports and post-war interrogations. American vehicles did not simply reappear. They came back bearing the marks of hurried repairs, imperfect paint, mismatched parts, welded scars. To German eyes, it looked less like maintenance and more like resurrection. For the mechanics themselves, the motivation was simple. Every vehicle repaired meant fewer infantrymen exposed. Every engine restarted meant a gun back in position. Their pride was not in medals, but in motion steel moving forward again. Asterisk that human determination formed the backbone of the system. Without it, the machines meant nothing, and tactically, those machines were never meant to stay still. Angle 2. Tactical shock. Turning attrition into momentum. German doctrine viewed battlefield damage as cumulative. Destroy enough vehicles, delay repairs long enough, and the enemy's advance would stall. This assumption had held true against most European armies. It failed against the Americans. U.S. commanders treated mechanical losses as temporary disruptions, not permanent setbacks. A disabled Sherman was pulled back just far enough to be shielded from direct fire. A repair truck followed, sometimes two. Sometimes a full mobile workshop convoy moved overnight, setting up operations before dawn. Within hours, a tank expected to be out of action for days would return to its unit. This changed the rhythm of combat. German officers planning counterattacks often misjudged American strength. Reconnaissance reports underestimated tank numbers, counting destroyed or disabled vehicles that no longer appeared operational. By the time an assault began, American armor strength had quietly recovered. The effect was cumulative and destabilizing. German attacks that relied on wearing down U.S. armor found themselves blunted again and again. Firepower that should have opened gaps instead met familiar silhouettes rolling forward once more. For German frontline commanders, the battlefield stopped behaving predictably. American mobility became elastic. Units absorbed damage, bent, then snapped back into shape. At the operational level, this allowed U.S. forces to maintain pressure even during pauses. While infantry regrouped, tanks were being rebuilt. While artillery shifted position, vehicles were being serviced. Time itself began to favor the American, and underpinning all of it was a technological system the Germans had underestimated. Angle 3. Technology on wheels. The mobile workshop revolution. Trucks themselves were unremarkable at first glance. Standardized chassis, canvas covers, no armor, no guns. Yet inside them were lathes, welding rigs, compressors, spare engines, and machine tools that rivaled fixed depots in Europe. These mobile repair shops were not improvised. They were planned years before the first American soldier landed in North Africa. U.S. industrial thinking assumed vehicles would break down. The solution was not to prevent failure entirely, but to recover from it faster than the enemy could exploit it. Each armored division carried multiple echelons of maintenance. Light repair teams worked closest to the front, handling track damage, wiring, optic, and minor engine issues. Heavier workshops followed behind, capable of full overhauls. If a vehicle could not be fixed in place, it was cannibalized, its parts redistributed within hours. German intelligence struggled to classify the system. It did not fit their model of rear area depots and centralized repair parks. American maintenance was fluid, dispersed, and deliberately redundant. Losing one workshop did not cripple the system. Another would arrive. This redundancy made destruction inefficient. Bombing repair units yielded little long-term gain. The system absorbed losses and continued to German observers. It felt as if the Americans were manufacturing tanks at the front itself, not in factories of concrete and steel but in mud, snow, and shattered villages, a moving factory line. Advancing with the army, and as German officers began to grasp this reality, a deeper realization followed. This was not just about machines. It was about leadership, planning, and a different philosophy of war. Angle 4. Leadership mindset. Logistics as a weapon. American commanders did not treat logistics as a background function. They treated it as a combat arm. From Eisenhower down to division-level officers, there was a shared understanding. Battles were decided not only by firepower, but by continuity. A tank that could fight today and again tomorrow mattered more than one that was technically superior but immobilized by breakdown. This philosophy shaped decisions at every level. Commanders planned advances based on fuel flow, spare part availability, and repair turnaround time. Orders were written with maintenance windows in mind. Units rotated vehicles deliberately, allowing worn machines to be pulled back, serviced, and returned without halting the broader advance. Crucially, maintenance officers were included in operational planning. They were not afterthoughts. They briefed commanders. They flagged risks. They proposed solutions before problems emerged. This integration stood in stark contrast to German practice late in the war, where logistical officers often reacted to crises rather than shaping operations. American leadership assumed friction would occur and built systems to absorb it. The result was resilience. When bridges were blown, engineers followed. When roads turned to mud, recovery vehicles were already positioned. When a battalion took losses in armor, replacements were not just shipped, they were prepared, serviced, and synchronized for return. To German officers studying American formations through binoculars and reports, it became increasingly clear this was not accidental efficiency. It was doctrine made visible on the battlefield. And from the other side of the line, that doctrine felt overwhelming. Angle 5. Enemy perception, confusion, frustration, and respect. Captured German reports from 1944 and 1945 repeatedly reference American material recovery with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. Vehicles thought destroyed were encountered again. Units believed depleted reappeared at near strength. This produced tactical miscalculations. German commanders allocated anti-tank assets based on faulty assumptions. They delayed attacks, expecting American armor to remain offline longer. When those attacks finally came, they faced restored formations. The psychological effect was corrosive. German crews began to doubt battle damage assessments. Kill claims lost meaning. Morale eroded not because Americans were invincible but because they were inexhaustible. Some German officers later acknowledged this openly. In post-war debriefings, they described American logistics as mechanized persistence, not brilliance in maneuver, but refusal to remain broken. Even when German tanks outgunned American models, the equation shifted. A Panther immobilized by transmission failure was a liability. A Sherman knocked out but repaired overnight was an asset regained. This inversion struck at the heart of German armored doctrine, which emphasized decisive engagements and technical superiority against an enemy that treated war as an industrial process. Single battles mattered less than sustained pressure. The Americans did not need perfection. They needed replacement. And replacement, in their system, was always on the move. Angle 6. Moral contrast to industrial cultures at war. Late 1944. The moral contrast between the two systems had become visible even to frontline soldiers. German crews often fought with the knowledge that a damaged vehicle might be lost forever. Spare parts were scarce. Fuel was rationed. Repairs depended on fixed facilities vulnerable to air attack. Cannibalization became common, stripping non-operational vehicles to keep a few running. American crews, by contrast, expected recovery. A breakdown was frustration, not despair. A disabled tank meant waiting, sometimes under fire, but also meant help was coming. This expectation changed behavior. Crews took calculated risks, knowing repair teams would follow. Commanders pressed forward, trusting that losses could be reversed. The war became not just a test of courage, but of confidence in systems. This was not about luxury or comfort. American repair units worked brutally hard. They died under shell fire. They labored in freezing rain and choking dust. but they did so within a framework that valued their role and supplied their needs. German industry, strained and bombed, could no longer match that tempo. The battlefield reflected this imbalance. Vehicles stalled, columns thinned, momentum slowed. The contrast was not simply material, it was philosophical. One side adapted war to industry, the other was being consumed by it. And as this imbalance widened, it set the stage for moments when the outcome of entire operations hinged not on who fired first but on who could keep moving when everything broke. December 1944. The Ardennes forest. Snow presses down on pine branches like a weight. Roads vanish beneath ice. Engines cough in the cold. For both sides, movement becomes punishment. Then the German offensive begins. Hitler's last gamble surges westward through narrow forest roads. Panzer columns push hard, aiming to split Allied lines, seize fuel depots, and force a negotiated peace. Speed is everything. Surprise is essential, but the terrain is unforgiving. German vehicles strain immediately. Overloaded half-tracks snap axles. Heavy tanks grind transmissions. Fuel trucks lag behind. Targets for Allied aircraft when the weather briefly clears. Repairs that should take hours stretch into days. At the same time, American units reel backward under pressure, but they do not dissolve. Behind the front, something else is already moving. Mobile repair shops roll through the snow at night. Wrecker crews follow artillery roads still under fire. Mechanics work under tarps, engines stripped open with numb hands. Damaged Shermans are pulled from ditches, patched, restarted. Trucks hit by shrapnel are welded, reloaded, returned to service. The American line bends, but it does not lose its spine. As German spearheads push deeper, they expect collapse. They expect broken units to stay broken. Instead, they encounter American formations that refuse to remain degraded. A tank knocked out near St. Vith is reported destroyed. 48 hours later, it reappears with a fresh engine block. An infantry battalion short on transport regains trucks overnight. Artillery that fell silent resumes fire. For German commanders, the offensive timetable begins to slip. Every hour matters. Every stalled vehicle is a wound that cannot be healed quickly. Recovery vehicles are scarce. Spare parts are mismatched. Repair depots lie far behind, under constant threat from Allied bombers. Meanwhile, American logistics operate forward. In the Ardennes, this difference becomes decisive. As the Germans outrun their supply lines, American repair columns shorten theirs. As fuel shortages bite German armor, American vehicles, though not immune, rotate, refuel, and return. The battlefield becomes a test of endurance rather than momentum. Near Bastogne, German forces tighten the ring. They expect isolation to do the work, but American trucks continue to move at night. Vehicles are repaired just far enough behind the line to avoid direct fire, close enough to matter. Every functioning truck becomes a weapon. Every recovered tank becomes resistance made steel. German officers begin to report a pattern. American strength is not fading at the expected rate. Losses are real but temporary. Equipment keeps coming back. This is the moment when the offensive starts to bleed time. And in modern war, time is not neutral. Time favors the side that can fix what breaks. As the snow continues to fall and the German advance slows mile by mile, the battlefield begins to reveal a deeper truth, one that will soon force a turning point. Not just in this offensive, but in the campaign itself. By the third week of December 1944, the Ardennes offensive is no longer advancing on maps the way it was planned in Berlin. German units are still fighting, still pushing, still sacrificing men and machines. But the rhythm is gone. Where the plan demanded speed, the battlefield now delivers delay. Columns halt for repairs that never finish. Vehicles are abandoned not because they are destroyed but because they cannot be fixed in time. Fuel trucks sit immobilized, engines frozen, hoses cracked. Panthers wait for parts that will not arrive. Tigers are blown up by their own crews when recovery becomes impossible. The offensive is starving not just for fuel, but for function across the lines. American repair units are operating at a pace German intelligence never anticipated. In muddy clearings and frozen farmyards, damaged vehicles are triaged like wounded soldiers. Some are cannibalized for parts. Others are stripped, rebuilt, and sent forward within days. Improvised workshops adapt civilian barns, rail spurs, even bombed-out towns into repair hubs. Nothing is wasted. This system changes the character of combat. When American units counterattack near Houghton and Manet, German commanders expect weakened resistance. Instead, they face armored formations that appear freshly equipped. Tanks that were written off days earlier return with new tracks. Artillery batteries fire at full strength. Supply trucks move in convoys protected by repaired half-tracks and armored cars. The German timetable collapses. Fuel depots remain out of reach. Roads clog with broken vehicles. The Luftwaffe cannot intervene. And now the weather turns. On December 23rd, the skies clear. Allied aircraft pour into the Ardennes, striking stalled German columns already crippled by mechanical failure. Vehicles that could have been repaired days earlier are destroyed from the air. Recovery becomes impossible. Losses multiply. American mobility accelerates at the exact moment German mobility vanishes. By Christmas, the truth is unavoidable. This is no longer an offensive, it is an extraction under fire. German commanders report that American units seem able to absorb damage without losing tempo. Tanks reappear. Trucks return. Guns keep firing. What should have been attrition becomes endurance, and endurance favors the side with tools, parts, and mechanics. Behind every American counterattack is a quiet workforce of soldiers whose names never appear in communiques. They do not fire weapons, they rebuild them. As January 1945 approaches, the bulge begins to shrink. German forces pull back, leaving behind hundreds of vehicles, many lightly damaged, many repairable in another war, another system. American recovery crews move in almost immediately, cataloging, towing, salvaging. The contrast is complete. 1. Army breaks when its machines break, the other keeps fighting, because its machines come back. The turning point of the Ardennes is not marked by a single explosion or surrender. It is marked by silence, the silence of engines that never start again on one side, and the steady rumble of repaired vehicles rolling forward on the other. That silence carries directly into what follows next, because once the German offensive fails, the consequences extend far beyond the snow-covered forest where it died. January 1945 arrives without ceremony. The snow remains. The forests are scarred, but the initiative has shifted permanently. The German Ardennes offensive has failed, not with a decisive encirclement, not with a grand surrender, but through exhaustion, mechanical, logistical, and human. Units withdraw eastward in fragments, leaving behind equipment they can no longer move, repair, or fuel. American recovery teams advance almost as quickly as frontline units. They catalog the battlefield in a way German forces never could. Hundreds of abandoned vehicles, Panthers, Stugs, half-tracks, trucks are found intact or lightly damaged. Many are repairable. Some are even pressed into Allied service for testing or intelligence analysis. Each wreck tells the same story. The machine did not die in combat. It died waiting. German after-action reports acknowledge the scale of the failure. Field commanders describe a crippling lack of recovery capability. Mechanics are present, but without spare parts, transport, or mobile workshops, they are powerless. Repairs that might have taken hours in American units would take weeks if they could be done at all. Time, not firepower, becomes the decisive enemy for American forces. The opposite is true. The U.S. Army emerges from the Ardennes not merely victorious, but validated. Its doctrine of forward maintenance, long criticized for its size and complexity, proves decisive. Mobile repair shops, redundant supply chains, and a deep reserve of trained mechanics ensure that losses remain temporary. Vehicles rotate through repair cycles with industrial efficiency. A tank damaged on Monday can return by Friday. Truck hit by shrapnel in the morning is hauling ammunition by nightfall. This resilience transforms morale. American infantry notice it first. Equipment failures no longer feel final. A breakdown does not mean abandonment or retreat, it means recovery. Confidence grows not in individual machines, but in the system behind them. German troops experience the opposite psychological shift. Abandonment becomes routine. Crews destroy their own vehicles not because they are defeated, but because they cannot afford to wait. Each demolition charges morale as heavily as enemy fire. The battlefield becomes a trail of self-inflicted loss. By late January, the strategic consequences are clear. The failure of the Ardennes drains Germany's remaining armored reserves. Replacement vehicles exist on paper, but cannot reach the front intact. Fuel shortages worsen. Repair infrastructure collapses under Allied bombing. The Western Front becomes irreversible. American forces, now fully mobile again, push eastward with increasing speed. The Rhine looms closer. Every mile gained compounds the logistical gap. The war has entered its final phase. But the lessons of the Ardennes do not end with territory inside Allied command structures. Reports circulate emphasizing what truly mattered. Not just bravery, not just tactics, but sustainment. The ability to repair faster than the enemy can destroy. 1. American logistics officer writes that the battle was won as much in workshops as in foxholes. That assessment quietly reshapes post-war doctrine, because what happened in the Ardennes is not an anomaly, it is a preview. The battlefield has changed, and the meaning of industrial warfare is about to be fully understood. February advances with steady inevitability. The snow recedes, the roads harden, and with them, the American advance accelerates. Across the Western Front, the effects of logistical superiority compound daily. U.S. armored divisions regain operational tempo at a pace German commanders cannot match. Vehicles repaired weeks earlier are now leading columns deeper into the Reich. Breakdowns occur, but they no longer halt movement. Recovery vehicles follow every spearhead like shadows. German forces attempt to adapt. Orders circulate demanding stricter vehicle discipline. Repairs are centralized. Non-essential movements are curtailed, but the solutions arrive too late. The infrastructure to support them no longer exists. Rail lines are shattered. Fuel depots burn nightly. Skilled mechanics are killed, captured, or reassigned as infantry. Even when machines survive combat, they rarely survive time. The imbalance becomes visible to prisoners of war. Captured German officers, questioned by Allied intelligence, consistently note the same disparity. Not American bravery, not superior weapons, but an endless ability to recover. Vehicles thought destroyed reappear days later. Units assumed crippled re-enter the line fully equipped. To German planners raised on precision engineering and technical excellence, the realization is bitter. The Americans are not winning because their machines are flawless. They are winning because failure is temporary. By March 1945, Allied forces crossed the Rhine in strength. The operation itself reflects the same doctrine. Mobile workshops cross pontoon bridges alongside tanks. Engineers carry spare parts as readily as explosives. When vehicles falter under the strain of river crossings, repairs begin immediately, often under fire. Momentum is preserved at all cost. Germany's final defensive lines collapse not in dramatic last stand, but in a series of forced withdrawals. Units retreat not because they are annihilated, but because they cannot hold ground without mobility. Infantry outruns its armor. Artillery is abandoned for lack of tractors. The battlefield fragments. Inside Germany, the contrast deepens. Factories still exist. Designs still evolve, but production no longer equals power. Without transport, fuel, or field maintenance, machines die far from combat. Industrial output becomes an illusion. Numbers without effect. When the war ends in May, Allied analysts begin the long task of interpretation. They do not focus solely on weapons. Instead, they study systems, supply chains, maintenance doctrine, repair cycles. The ability to regenerate combat power under stress. The Ardennes becomes a case study, not as a failure of German courage, not as a triumph of American armor, but as proof that modern war belongs to those who can sustain motion. In post-war Germany, former officers write memoirs acknowledging the lesson. Many admit that technical superiority without logistical depth is fragile. Precision without redundancy is vulnerable. Excellence without endurance collapses. Across the Atlantic, the lesson is institutionalized. The U.S. military embeds logistics at the core of doctrine. Mobile repair units become permanent. Training emphasizes recovery as much as attack. War, it is understood, is not a single clash but a continuous process. The battlefield has been redefined, and that realization leads naturally to a final question. What does it mean for soldiers, for nations, for history when wars are decided not only by how battles are fought, but by how quickly armies can stand back up afterward? The war is quieting. Guns fall silent, and the endless rhythm of engines, once the heartbeat of combat, fades into memory. Yet the echoes of that mechanical endurance linger, shaping strategy, technology, and the very idea of modern warfare. The Ardennes, and battles like it, reveal the truth as simple as it is profound. Victory does not belong solely to the strongest, nor to the most skilled, nor even to the bravest. It belongs to the army that can rise again faster, smarter, and more resilient than its opponent. The Americans demonstrated this principle not through daring alone, but through a network of maintenance, repair, and regeneration that turned failure into opportunity. For the men on the ground, this meant survival. Tanks returned from ruins. Trucks resumed supply lines. Artillery, once silent, roared again. Soldiers witnessed firsthand that a machine broken today could fight tomorrow. And in that rhythm of repair, hope endured. To German forces, this was astonishing, almost incomprehensible. The enemy's ability to sustain combat power redefined expectations of what a military could achieve. For history, the lesson was deeper. It shifted the focus from sheer firepower to systemic endurance. The war was no longer simply a sequence of engagements. It became a contest of adaptation, resourcefulness, and logistical intelligence. The victories of 1944–45 were as much about moving parts and trained hands as about bullets and shells. On a human level, it reminds us that progress is often invisible. The ingenuity of those who work behind the lines, mechanics, engineers, logisticians, shapes outcomes as profoundly as any frontline act of heroism. Their quiet labor, meticulous and unglamorous, can determine the fate of nations. In the end, the Ardennes teaches that resilience is a force multiplier. Strength lies not only in weapons, but in the capacity to recover, repair, and advance. Modern warfare, as revealed in those frozen forests and snowbound roads, is as much about endurance as it is about attack. And the true measure of power is the speed at which one can rise after being struck down. The machines may fall, but those who know how to lift them again define the battlefield. And in that lesson, the story of the mobile repair shops, the endless logistics, and the unbroken spirit of the Americans endures long after the guns have gone silent.